pumpkin bread.
I'll have Leanna and I'm just going to get the case already boxed
that's
up.
fine. I'll put them back. If you want to get the case and finish that up, I'll...
Maple syrup. Mm. $9.44. Okay, we're gonna have to get out there soon. This is a map of their farm.
Something really cool I needed.
Okay, let's see. Oh, could I?
What I want to do is you see how we're here?
You're here.
Over here.
Where are the chickens?
Chickens are all the way out here. The cows are here, and whatever that is here.
I don't have to get to the chickens.
Cool.
Follow me.
You think there's some fish in there?
Yeah. There's definitely a fish.
Come on, son.
Apparently we're going to the blue tractor.
Keep going.
To talk about first, I'm Joel. I'll be your Lunatic host for the next 2 hours. And thank you for coming out, and we're very grateful that the rain stopped here this morning. We have a beautiful, beautiful morning here in mid-June. Yeah. To go on a tour, and we really appreciate you coming. At the end of the tour, I'll just make the note that while we're gone, they're going to be setting up the hot dog stand and all that, and we'll have Polyface hot dogs for you, so you can enjoy that by the time we're done. Our other driver is Matt, one of our apprentices, and looks like Cameron's there to help him, one of our interns. So we have a intern in a different level. So a couple housekeeping things first. This is especially for safety. We love kids. We especially like nice, healthy kids, not run-over kids. So run-over kids get kind of flat and gushy, and it just, you know, it really dampens the tour when you run over a kid. It happens every time. So the key is nobody gets off a wagon until you hear the tractor engine stop. Sometimes we have to stop momentarily, open a gate, you know, do something, move something out of the way, and so we need to make sure that nobody gets off a wagon until the engines actually stop. That's the main safety thing. Two other things. One is this is not a lecture; it's a discussion. So do please feel free to ask questions as long as you want, with this caveat. I know we have 2 hours. We will try to confine this to 2 hours, pretty close. And so that means that sometimes we can't get to all the questions at the stop that are there. I know how many more stops we got to make, and so, you know, we can't get bogged down on stop 1 for an hour and then not get stops 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So, when I say it's time to go, we're going to have to go, but that doesn't mean I don't care about your question. It just means when the tour is over, I'll hang around and we can talk about things after the tour, okay? I'm not going to run off as soon as the tour is over. That's one thing. The second one is that no topic is off limits, so we're not too concerned about political correctness here. We don't want to be offensive, but we also don't want to tiptoe around every little difficult topic. So it's fine to talk about, you know, how do I get my wife to like the farm as much as I do? Or, you know,
Oh, he needs to talk.
how do I get the kids to enjoy picking green beans with me? You know, those kinds of
I do enjoy it.
Kind of issues.
So I
We're
don't
glad to
think we need that.
discuss, you know, religion, politics, family dysfunction, whatever. Okay? So bring it on, and it's okay. Every tour becomes a living thing. Different kinds of people, different kinds of interests. Some go way over into political weeds. Others go way over into, you know, ecology weeds. Some don't do any weeds at all. So we just let them live to whatever they're going to live. So just feel free to chime in. Enjoy the time here. We do have ice water and cups. Feel free to fill your own little water vessels and or use the cup. If you do take a cup to use, we do use paper cups, but try to hang on to it and don't let it get away from you in the field. Obviously, if it does, nobody's going to die over it. And fortunately, they're paper, so the worms will finally eat them up. But if you use one, try to just hang on to it and keep it the rest of the tour. I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. So every tour is different. The one we're going to do today, and we're going to go to broilers first. That's the meat chickens. We don't have any pigs close enough for us to see. We've got pigs up in the paddocks in the mountain, but we can't haul this up the mountain road. It's way, way too hard and risky and dangerous. So we're not going to actually see the pigs on pasture, but we will talk about them. So we'll go to the broilers first, and then the carbon farming, the hay shed composting complex, and then we'll go to the Millennium Feathernet. We might do the cows first on the way to the Millennium Feathernet, and then the egg mobiles, and then we'll finish up back here. Okay? All right. See in a little bit.
3 minutes.
So these guys are for eating, not for egg laying. They will lay eggs if they, if they've got mature, but we don't let them get completely mature. We dress them as juvenile. So these are the same kind of chickens genetically that would be in a Tyson chicken house or whatever, but they're not raised anywhere close to the same way. These are 10 foot by 12 foot by 2 foot high floorless shelters. There's about 75 chickens in each one, and we move them every single morning to a new spot. So they get a fresh salad bar, they get their bedding changed, new linens, new sheets and stuff, pillowcases, all right, every morning. So they're not in yesterday's excrement, and they get grass, clover, bugs, and of course they get local GMO-free grains. They are omnivores. So now just to show you how we move them, I'll move one. They've already been moved once this morning, but these guys will get a treat. They'll get the second move today. I'll move them to just show you how it's done. All right, so we have this little dolly here, okay? And once we put Tyson's out of business, these dollies will be available at all your local Ace Hardware stores. Just put that under. Okay? That just breaks ground contact. And then the birds just walk on the ground. A little bit off normal. I think I have a Matt?
Yes, sir.
Now, I've got a cripple back here in the back of this one.
What's that?
No. Right here in this back corner. I've got a cripple here that's not moving. Take them out. Okay. Now we'll move it like it's supposed to go. Okay.
Oh, just the dog makes a skid.
Alright. So, yeah, those don't happen very often, but alright. So the whole move takes about 60 seconds or less. And so in 60 seconds you can move 75 birds. I'll be honest with you, these birds are struggling a little bit with all the wetness we've had.
Yeah.
Chickens don't like to be soaked all the time, so they're borderline unhappy. But sun's out now, they'll perk right up here today. They're just the ducks like this a lot better. Chickens, obviously, our biggest variable here is there's no free lunch. So, you know, every day is not 70 degrees and blue skies and puffy clouds. There are periods of incredible rain. One of the reasons that we have them staggered like this is so when we get, and you can feel how wet the ground is. In fact, it's vexing my soul to even ride these wagons on the ground today, but looks like we're going to make it. Is that when we have surface runoff, if we've got runoff coming down the field, the runoff from this shelter isn't going to one next to it. So they all get fresh. At least the water, the wet water they're getting is fresh and clean and not, you know, poopy water from the ones uphill. So there's a lot of thinking and logistics and hygiene and health in, you know, in the way we're handling the shelter. So one person in 60 minutes can move 5,000 chickens without starting an engine, no petroleum, nothing, okay? It's extremely efficient. The shelters are made carefully to run toward the east with the open end to catch that morning sun. Chickens like the morning sun. The west end is capped, and then when it gets hot this time in the summer, then we take off that middle panel in the back so it becomes a breezeway and keeps them. So in the early spring, that section in the back is fully closed, and then later in the summer we take that one panel off and open it up to let more air go through. A couple things that are going on here, and we'll go to questions. First of all, let's talk about where the state of farming now, where the average farmer is now 60 years old.
Oh boy.
In America. Now, if you read any business book, it'll tell you that when any economic sector of the country hits an average practitioner of more than 35 years old, that's a sector in decline. A vibrant economic sector is average 35 years old, okay? I mean, think of the military. What's the average age of everybody in the military?
Under 30.
Under 30. Yeah, only the old geezers are in there after 30 and 40, okay? So vibrancy has an age factor to it. Now, farming hasn't been 35 for a very, very long time. So the question is obviously, well, why? And there's numerous reasons. But the fact is that when the hurdles, the impediments to entry for young people are so high that young people can't get in, old people can't get out. So to have successional fluidity, you have to have ease of entrance and ease of exit, both directions, okay? All right. So what's the single biggest impediment to entry for a young person into farming?
Land.
Cost of land, bingo, right here. Don't normally get it hit that quick. You guys are sharp today. All right, the cost of land. So I've got a proposition for you. What if we took the land out of the equation? Let's just take the land out of the equation. Now you say, well, where's the guy going to farm? Okay, here's the thing you need to understand. A farm has nothing inherently to do with land. Uh-oh. Now he's really gone off into the weeds.
Yeah, there's people doing urban vertical farms.
Sure. what I'm getting at is you don't have to, yes, farming does involve land, but it doesn't have to be your land. A farm, the reason that we call this a farm is because there's something special about this piece of property that's different than the game commission property, the strip mall property, the condominium property. What's the city park property, the median of the highway property? Why do we call this property a farm? Why do we call it a farm? It's used. You're in the ballpark, but that's all.
Produces food.
Yeah, it's a D+ answer. but at least it's not failure. You're in the ballpark. Most of the time, the first couple answers are F. Okay. All right, use. Somebody else have another idea?
Because it's taxed as a farm.
Because it's taxed as a farm?
Regulations.
Regulations.
It's operated by a farmer.
Ah, bingo! Who's my star here? Yes, because there is a farmer, which does obviously have something to do with use. You were in the ballpark, so that's why I didn't want to exclude you. Regulations, now that's clear out my window. All right, so what it has to, the reason that this piece of land is called a farm is because there's a farmer. And one of the problems I have with all the farmland preservation efforts is that they all deal with farmland and not farmers. And if we don't preserve farmers, we don't preserve farmland. You've got to attack the farmer situation first, and then the land will take care of itself. Okay, so 3 M's. If you were a class taking notes, this would be good test material. 3 M's here, properly alliterated so you can remember them. All right, so we're going to drop the impediments to entry for a young person getting into farming by divorcing the land from the farm. The first M is that the infrastructure, the model is mobile infrastructure. Suddenly now we can place this farm, this infrastructure on land we own, land we rent, land we squat on, land, whatever, okay? It can go anywhere. We can put these on a trailer, take them up the road, put them on the median interstate, put them in the city park. We can put it, anywhere, okay? So mobility completely changes the infrastructural capitalization deal. The neat thing about mobile infrastructure is that it's not anywhere on a government form. It's not equipment, so it's not personal property. It's not a building, so it doesn't require inspection or real estate. It's a nothing, and I like farming with a nothing. Okay, that's cool. All right, so it's mobile. Number 2 is it's modular. If you want to raise chickens for Tyson, not that anybody here would want to raise chickens for Tyson, but if you did, what would be the first thing you'd have to do?
Buy a chicken house.
Build a chicken house. And it ain't a $10 chicken house. It's like a $500,000 chicken house. Now we're talking about a big mortgage, talking about a big chicken house. Okay. Would you call that an impediment to entry?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. In fact, I even call it elitist fraternity, because that's what they call me, because I raise these, exotic chickens, pastured chickens, They call me an elitist, right? Well, I think if you've got to borrow $500,000 to build a confinement chicken house and join that fraternity, that's pretty elitist too, okay? So let's be careful about throwing around our fingers of elitism. All right, so the modular aspect allows you to, if you want to build a Tyson chicken house, you got to pay $500,000 here. All you got to do is not go to the movies or eat out for a month, save your pennies, and you can build one of these, and you can be in the chicken business. And if you like it, you can retain your profits and build a second one. And if you like it even more, you can build a third. And if you're not so like we are, you can build 150 of them. The point is that you can scale, you can get in at no debt, and you can scale with retained earnings and downscale easily because all of your equity is not in infrastructure. That's called nimble business, which if you know, is one of the new critical terms in business. It's not the big that eats the small, it's the fast that eats the slow. It's about resilience and nimbleness. All right, so modular. And the third M, So we got, what are the two M's so far?
Mobility, modular.
All right, the third M, management intensive. And suddenly this is where all the naysayers point their fingers at me and say, I knew I got you. I knew there was a flaw in here. The fatal flaw is this takes more people farm. This takes more farmers. And they say it with a little curled lip derision of condescension, as if a society that has more farmers is somehow failing the planet. Right? I mean, we've got a societal temperament toward marginalization of farmers. If you don't believe me, tell me the last time you went to a high school guidance counselor and had a really smart kid, and the guidance counselor says, "Wow, you're in the top 5% of the graduates. You're smart. You should go be a farmer." Ever had it happen? No. All right. And so this is a problem societally. All right. So yes, guilty. It does take more people on the farm. Yep.
Good thing.
Yep. But it takes a lot fewer people in pharmaceutical labs and cleaning up manure spills and fish kills on the Neuse River in North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina didn't have a hurricane every 3 years to flush all the hog lagoons. The place would be swimming in toilet right now. Okay. So there are all these externalized and different costs. So we put people on the farm, and so it becomes a people-centric farm. Now, what that does is that it moves our equity. Here's the thing you got to understand. It moves our equity from capital intensity, infrastructure intensity, pharmaceutical intensity, energy intensity. You don't see any concretes or fans or anything running here. All right. It moves all of that to information, skill, and customers. And there's not a banker in the world that can ever come to you and say, "I'm going to foreclose on your skill. I'm going to repossess your knowledge." You know, nobody can do that. So suddenly our equity moves from physical to non-physical. That's cool.
That is.
Yeah.
Okay. So in America, the average farm, it takes $4 worth of depreciable infrastructure. We're not even talking about the land here. We're talking about the equipment and the buildings. So if you're turning $100,000 gross sales on the average American farm, you'll have $400,000 in tractors, buildings, equipment, and all that stuff. Okay, 4 to 1. Our ratio here is 50 cents to 1.
Wow.
That's an 800% difference in hard equity compared to annual gross sales. Anybody ever heard of the information economy? This is the information economy. Okay, this is where it is. So the 3 M's: mobile, modular, management intensive. And we don't apologize that we put more people on the farm. Okay, we think that's a good thing. As Wes Jackson, author of Altars to Unhewn Stone, says, the eyes per acre ratio is the beginning of food farm resource accountability. And when we start extracting the eyes to acre ratio, we start dropping that ratio down where there's fewer eyes, fewer people, fewer feet on the ground, that's where you start making shortcuts.
Yeah, and that's also where you start having unintended consequences.
And that's where you start having some really big unintended consequences. Okay, enough of the pre-ramble. Questions. The floor is open now for questions. For
I just want to say something. We ate some of your chicken last night in a restaurant up in
Harrisonburg.
It was wonderful.
Oh, good. Thank you. Pick up your commission check at the end. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
If you got the chickens coming through now, when did you have the cows come through?
Okay. The question is, the chickens are coming through now. When will the cows come through? Okay. We graze with the cows ahead of the chickens. The chickens like short grass. Chickens can't actually. I mean, this may not look like much, but this is what the chickens like, because it's small enough that they can get it in their beak, they can masticate it, you know, they can work with it. They don't like long, they don't know what to do with long blades of grass, okay? Turkeys, on the other hand, like chickens don't. All right, so we graze with the cows. Now this happened to, we made this into hay, so we mowed it that way mechanically, but we graze ahead of them with the cows to shorten the grass. But we also, of course, harvest the extra bloom of grass that grows behind the chickens, because they're dropping, of course, a lot of manure here, which is fertilizing the field, and so we'll graze behind them with the cows when we need to. Or, you know, we might, if we don't get to it in time with the cows, we may make that into hay. So, but the point is, yes, we use the cow. We integrate the herbivore with the omnivore in a symbiotic relationship.
How soon after the cows
to mow pre or mow harvest?
How soon after the cows pass do the chickens arrive?
How soon after the cows pass do the chickens arrive? Well, the chickens here are they are an enterprise of their own, and so the cows come around them as needed if the grass gets too long.
Oh.
Okay. So there's not some sort of a schedule. It's just, is the grass too long for the chickens? Let's bring the cows in. Okay. So it's as needed. And obviously, if we were in a drought situation, the cows wouldn't need to come here for a long time. But being as wet as we are, chances are the cows need to come here in a couple weeks. Yeah. Another thing that the short grass does is that it protects the chickens from predation. Predators will come across this short grass, but they tend to not, especially the smaller predators like weasels and minks and things like that. The bigger raccoons, yeah, they'll come across it, but not the smaller stuff, because they'll be picked up by a great horned owl who can now see them because they can't slither through the little short grass. Okay? I mean the tall grass. The tall grass. Yes?
So one challenge I imagine with being mobile is that it takes a lot of time and effort to invest in your soil, and your soil health, your biology, your nutrients. So I wouldn't want to do that for someone else. I would want to have a farm where I know the soil is mine and I could take care of it for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
How
do with that? You can't have everything. So if you can get cheap land and get started, one of the beautiful things is that soil can heal pretty fast. With these kinds of symbiotic systems, you can move soil, dramatically in 2 or 3 years.
But if it's not yours, you're doing that for someone else.
That's fine.
Okay.
There's no value to it. You got to realize there's no value. Our culture does not value good soil. There's not a place on a farm tax return that says, have you improved your soil? There's no place. Okay, and the marketplace, the market price does not reflect. Now it used to back in the 50s and the 40s. If your land was more fertile, it was more valuable. Today, it has nothing to do with anything. It's completely not valueless. So what you have to do is establish a place, and you can make your place into what you want fairly quickly. The only one that's really difficult to do this with is orchard. Orchard and vineyard, that's a little tougher, okay? But everything else is, when you go to mobile, it changes it dramatically. Maybe another question. Yes, yes.
Okay, so you have this field here. Do you average 4,000 or 5,000 chickens a week, and then is this the only one you have? Or?
Okay, the question is the land base. All right, so there's 75 birds in a shelter. So if you take the square footage of the shelter and the daily move, every 500 birds is covering 1 acre. So in 20,000 chickens, we cover 20 acres. So we have 2 fields here, this one and the one on the other side of those trees. They're almost identical, they lie the same, they're just, okay. And so when we started obviously at the end of this field, way up there, early this spring. We've been moving them, 4 yards forward every single day, okay. And when we get to the end of this field, we'll put all these on trailers, hay wagons, and run them up to this other field, and we'll run them up there to finish out the season. So they only encounter a given square foot 1 day a year. We don't have to be so meticulous on the egg mobiles, the feather nets, that sort of thing, because the density is not as high, and the birds are mature birds. These are juvenile birds. These birds are only 7 weeks old, okay? And so they have a very juvenile immune system. So you got to be a lot more careful about pathogenicity and toxicity, immunological function with these than you do with the layers, the cows, the bigger animals. We did have we participate with a lot of different things around the country. We've had a couple Smithsonian studies done here. One we had a couple of years ago was a UNC vet student. She was in a vet school at University of North Carolina, and she wanted to do a paper comparing the salmonella, the residual ground. Salmonella lives in the soil, and according to the books, it's ubiquitous. It's blah blah blah. And she wanted to compare where we had chickens for 50 years. Compared to a farm that hadn't had any chickens for 50 years, and looked at the residual salmonella and see, what the differences were. And I said yes with a little bit of fear and trepidation, but the findings were our load was no more than a farmer hadn't had a chicken for 50 years. So it was a very affirming, confirming thing for us that our 1 day of access and then a year of rest, and with cows and other things, was enough to keep it at a normal rate. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You had your own chicks, and what's the turnaround time for?
Yeah. We don't hatch our own chicks. These come from a hatchery. Again, these are the same genetics as the industry uses, just raised completely differently. Okay. And if you've had them or tasted them or felt them, they don't feel, they don't look like, the fat's different, the oil, everything is different on these birds. They're only picking up maybe 10% of their diet from the pasture, but it's like a supplement. That little supplemental whatever, vitamin C or whatever that you take is not a large percentage of your diet, but it can make a big difference in your health. Okay, and so that's what the pasture is to these chickens. So we get these from a hatchery. Now with the layers, we are hatching our own from old layers, and we'll talk about that a little more when we get up there. I'm waiting for the question about why are we using the Cornish cross? Why don't you use a heritage chicken? Is anybody getting ready to ask that question? That's right about this time is about the time. As soon as you say the word breed, then you get these.
Because you brought it up twice as a fishing bait.
Yeah. So I want to address that right here. Be proactive about it. This may shock you. Now we do have the heritage roosters that are the brothers of the sisters that we hatch for our own layers. Okay, so we have those. But our main, we don't do but a few hundred a year. The main reason that we raise these broilers is because one of our goals here is we want to offer society, the world, a viable alternative to the factory house. We envision a world where there is no factory house. None.
Yeah.
And we want to prove that it's not necessary, that there's a viable alternative to the factory house. Now, in marketing, in moving a society, people, customers, whatever, potential, interest, they will only let you be so weird. You can be a nudist or you can be a Buddhist, but a nudist Buddhist, it's just too weird. I ain't listening to that dude. All right. It's the same thing with these chickens, all right? If I tell you, you really don't want to get your chicken from Walmart. You want to get your chicken from someplace else, which means you have to, you can't put it in your shopping cart with the toilet paper, okay? This takes more effort. Are you with me? Okay? And then, so we say that. And then to add to that, not only that, but you want only brown meat, a razor, you don't want a plump breast, you want a real thin razor breast, all dark meat that can't be cooked very fast. You've just become a nudist Buddhist, okay? So what we want is a chicken that looks enough like in phenotype, okay, like what you're used to seeing in the meat counter at Kroger's, So it's not, it doesn't shock you with that difference. So it's close enough, but it's not so weird that you won't jump into it. Okay? When I tell people you really don't want any white meat, and your kids don't really want any breast, and you really don't want to be able to cook anything fast, you need to be able to crock pot everything. When you go down that road, suddenly you've just dropped your marketability way down, and you are no longer, and not only that, but you're going to pay $35 for a 3-pound chicken. That, listen, I'm glad there are people doing that. I am. I really am glad there are people doing that, okay? But I'm telling you right now, that's not going to change the world as fast as I want to change it, okay? And maybe someday we can get there. Maybe when we shut down all the factory houses, then society will progress to the point where, they're ready to do these others. I mean, we certainly have a contingent of people who do want the razor-breasted, dark-meated, orange-fatted, different looking bird, okay? And that's great, okay? But it's even among our, loyal customers, it's a very, very small percentage, because those big, fat breast, boneless, skinless breasts are, they're hard to give up, okay? Maybe one more question, we're going to head to the next stop. Yes, sir.
So are the pens staggered by age of the chicken, or is this all?
No, the shelters are staggered by moving logistics, all right? There are several reasons for the staggering. As I mentioned earlier, one is, so if you have rain and surface runoff, the runoff from one shelter isn't going into another one, okay? So that's one. The second is that by staggering them, when we move them, we can run every shelter right adjacent to where the previous one went. If they were side by side, we'd have to leave 2 or 3 feet of access space between each shelter, so they'd be lined up here with 3 feet of wasted space between each shelter, and you'd waste all that space, and it's just not nearly as logistically easy to work with as covering every single square foot right along the field. I mean, again, you add, 3 feet doesn't sound like much, but if you add 3 feet times 30, now you're at 90 feet, and suddenly now you can't get the shelters in the field, and now you've got zebra stripes, you've got fertilized and unfertilized, it's just a lot better to have them staggered.
I mean more like, how do you choose how to separate which chickens into which pen?
Oh, they come out a batch at a time. So they're coming out at 1,500 in a batch. So that 1,500 bird batch is going to go into 20 shelters or whatever it is. Okay, and so you just line up the shelters. Notice the shelters have numbers on them, so we can identify. We can say we're gonna butcher pen 9, 10, 11 tomorrow. Okay, and then you know who to give, how to handle all that in the field. Okay. We'll get more questions at the end of the tour. We got to get on to the hay shed, so let's load back up on the hay wagons. We'll see if we can get out of this field. When we run out of grass in the wintertime, we go to hay, which hay, for those of you that are uninitiated, hay is simply dehydrated grass. You can think of it as raisin grass, okay? Like raisins, grapes, okay? So raisin grass, all right? I mean, for urbanites, sometimes you have to, get this stuff in a place where people can get it, all right? So hay is simply dried grass. And in the wintertime, when there's 2 feet of snow on the ground and we run out of grass, then we feed hay. That's what people make hay for, is for that off season, because you can't just get rid of the cows and bring them back when you have feed. I mean, in the old days, they used to migrate from Florida to Ontario and the Yucatan Peninsula up to British Columbia, right? well, maybe not BC, but there, Saskatchewan, all right, Manitoba. Anyway, they can migrate and go where the feed was. Well, we can't do that today because the neighbor doesn't want them, and it's too hard to get them to, you know, Manitoba in February. So we make hay and we store it, all right? And so we feed in these boxes, and these boxes are just hanging here on a pulley with a winch at the back. We can raise them and lower them. Those cows in the wintertime, well, all the time, but in the winter it becomes a more of a critical issue. They're dropping 50 pounds of material out their back end every day. 50 pounds, okay? And that material is highly soluble and it's highly volatile. In other words, if it gets wet, it's soluble, it diffuses into the groundwater or whatever. If it gets dry, it vaporizes, and of course we all know what that smells like, okay? So what we want to do is that 50 pounds of material we want to capture during that dormant season, because during the dormant winter, the ground is dormant. You know, the earthworms are kind of shut down for the winter, the actinomycetes and the mycelium and all that, you know, they're kind of hibernating. And so the soil can't metabolize, it can't ingest that fertility in the wintertime like it does in the summer when all that microorganic activity is functional. So what we want to do is we want to tie all that soluble, volatile nutrient down with what we call a carbonaceous diaper. Okay? So on the other side of us right there is what we call the carbon shed. That's where we store carbon. Wood chips, sawdust, bark, old corn stover from the neighbors, you know, if they don't, junk hay that got moldy or rained on, leaves, you know, peanut hulls. I mean, there's all sorts of carbon waste. And so this allows us to store it, and then we utilize it as a carbonaceous diaper under the cows when they're in here. So they're in here, they're eating in this box, okay, like that, and they're pooping out here, and we're layering in this carbon behind them as a big sponge to absorb that 50 pounds of material a day, and it just builds up during February, and you know, when they're in here, and it'll get up to, you know, 4 feet deep in here. Okay, and as it builds, we just keep lifting the box, all right, to accommodate the depth of the bedding pack behind them. Now those cows, as they work in that bedding pack, of course they're walking around and tromping, and they're tromping out the oxygen, so that spongy manure, urine, carbonaceous wood chip, all right, bedding pack is anaerobic, because the cows they're heavy, you know, and they're pushing out the oxygen. So it's actually anaerobic, which means it's fermenting, all right? And as we build it through the winter, we add corn to it, just whole shelled corn. We just put it in there, and then we put new bedding on top of it, and you know, so it's in there. And then the cows, of course, they tromp it all in there. It's all mixed up good. So in the spring, when the grass begins to grow, we come back out on the field with grazing. We've got this deep bedding pack in here, anaerobic, that's full of fermented corn. And then we put in the pigorators. And if you've ever looked closely at a pig, every pig has a sign on his forehead that says, "We'll work for corn." And the pigs then seep that embedded corn, fermented corn, in the bedding pack. And in the process of seeking it, of course, they're turning it over and they're fluffing it like a big egg beater, and they're creating aerobic, injecting the oxygen and converting this whole thing from anaerobic to aerobic compost. Okay? So the animals do all that work. I'm sure some of you are familiar with these, you know, great big $20,000, you know, windrow compost turners, you know, where they go through. That's Neanderthal, man. Pigs are where it's at, let me tell you. Okay? And the pigs So they do all this work, and when we turn, you know, thousands of tons of compost using the pigs. And the pigs, you know, they don't need spare parts. They don't need their oil changed. They'll never sue you for anything. They don't need minimum wage. You know, what a retirement program, when you're done with them, you eat them, you know. So there's no even, you know, social insecurity to worry about. And so those pigs are doing all this work instead of equipment, petroleum, and machinery, and time and labor. And by using appreciating animals to do the work, suddenly it makes the profit potential size neutral, because we haven't had to generate the volume to replace the infrastructure that rots, rusts, and depreciates. That was a mouthful, okay? But I hope you get the sequence there. All right. So another beauty of this is that again, it's scalable. So because we're not using appreciating equipment, which is of course cheaper by the million and cheaper by the yard, one of the reasons farmers have to get big to stay in business is because when you're basically in the mechanical materials handling business, it is cheaper by the million, cheaper by the tons. It's a lot cheaper to move a cubic yard of dirt with a 3-yard track loader than a 1-yard track loader, because the big cost is in the operator sitting on the seat. Okay. Well, these pigs work pretty cheap. Okay. And so 2 pigs with 2 cows can work as well as, you know, 100 pigs with 100 cows. Now, when the compost is done, like I just showed you, when that compost is done, so what I had you all smell was cow manure. A couple months ago, it was cow manure, and it didn't smell like cow manure, did it? I mean, you could go in there and eat a sandwich, all right? And so one of our deals is that good farming should always be aesthetically and aromatically, sensually romantic. If you're holding your nose and covering your eyes, it's not good farming, all right? It should be something that children enjoy being a part of, that you enjoy immersing yourself in, and all that. And so, so this then becomes the heart and soul of the entire fertility program and the soil building program. It's what we call the carbon economy, the true carbon. This isn't cap and trade. This isn't some, you know, scheme. This is real. And I'll just close with this and go to questions. Just imagine if all the money spent, let's just say Virginia, all right? I mean, you could do the whole nation, but let's just say Virginia's. You go too big, it's too big to get your head around. So just say Virginia. If all the money spent on chemical fertilizer in Virginia were spent on carbon, in situ, on-site carbon development, it would fundamentally change our ecology. It would change our soil structure and building capacity, and it would give us an entire new economic engine to affirm the vocations of the 40% of Americans who don't aspire to sit at the end of an expressway in a Dilbert cubicle all day, punching numbers into a Fortune 500 cyberspace. Okay? If you go to any business conference, you will see the CEOs wringing their hands and fretting right now about, what do we do with people who don't want to sit in front of a computer all day? And there's a lot of angst right now of real serious socio-economic forecasters of what do we do with people who want to work with their hands, who want calluses, who enjoy splinters and tactile, visceral stuff. And we're now reaping the results of essentially 2 generations of marginalizing and speaking condescendingly to people who do physical craft. I mean, Rockingham County Schools, their plumber is retiring, and they've canvassed the country trying to find somebody that'll be the school division plumber to keep the toilets working, and they can't even get an applicant. Really? And it pays $100,000.
Wow.
Why? Because plumbing ain't sexy. I think it's really sexy. Okay? But this is what we've done. Yeah, I mean, you can, every small engine mechanic in town, desperate for somebody. Every mechanic shop where we get our tractors worked on, constantly looking for somebody who will fix it. It looks, if you could build things, fix things, and make things, that's a lot more important than how many numbers you can put into cyberspace. And I appreciate computers, and you know, well, I kind of appreciate it. But this is a real social problem. Is, you know, those guys who can't stand to sit in calculus class, and gals, and who just sit there staring out the window saying, man, I wish I could be out there on that lawnmower. I wish I could be out there on that chainsaw. I wish I could be out there in the woods. A lot of us like that, okay? And so a carbon economy, so our chips, what we have an industrial wood chipper that we generate most of our chips right here on the farm. We have a big chipper that will handle stuff 18 inches in diameter. So you can just stick a 40-foot tree in. You know, gives you a cubic yard of chips in about 2 minutes. Okay? I mean, it's the ultimate boy toy, right? The difference between men and boys is the price of their toys. But for us, so we have never spent a dime on a bag of chemical fertilizer. What we have invested in a lot is in situ carbon sequestration and development, including stewarding our own woodlots. I'm a big fan of permaculture. I've already heard several of you use the term here today. I really appreciate that, permaculture. One of the permaculture concepts is we need more forest and fewer trees. And they're exactly right. Every time I have a visitor from Scandinavia, Norway, Finland, up there, Sweden, they all just come in and they just start haranguing about America and our forests. Oh, you stupid people! You know, well, they don't say it. Swedes would never say that. You are very inefficient in the way you handle your. Okay. Anyway, the point is that we have weedy woods. If you want to see the worst example of forestal silvicultural stewardship in the country, just drive the Blue Ridge Parkway, look at the Shenandoah National Park. It's the biggest ecological disaster in the East. Okay? It's weedy. You got all this diseased, crooked junk trees. We got all this solar energy wanting to go into good stems, and we don't have good stems that are weeded and have room to capture it and go into good stems. And so a carbon economy would fill our forests with silvicultural stewards who would prune and manage and capture solar energy into good, healthy stems instead of junk. One other little point, let me tell you. Pre-European, the forestal economy all ran on save the big, take the little, and the diseased and the crooked. Because the forestal economy ran on fire and kindling. You know, without chainsaws and saws, you know, with stone tools, a Native American walks up to a big 4-foot diameter oak tree with your little stone hatchet, right? That's a pretty formidable thing to stand in front of with a little stone hatchet, okay? And so the entire pre-European forestal economy was using little stuff that you could bend, that you could take easily, and the fire took the diseased and the compromised trees out, and left the really strong, vibrant trees. And so it all ran on culling the poor and keeping the really great trees. And when that policy is handled, what do you get? You get genetic development. Are you with me? I mean, this is stockmanship. This is right. You cultivate the good ones and you don't cultivate the bad ones, right? That's tomatoes, whatever. Okay. Well, when the Europeans came, we came with iron. We came with saws. And if you're going to mill lumber, if you're going to actually cut boards, it's way more efficient to cut a big log than a little log. And so as soon as Europeans landed here, we completely inverted that millennial forestal economy of saving the best and culling the worst, and inverted it to taking the best and leaving the worst. And we've been doing that now for 300 years, to the point where a lot of the forestry folks, Virginia Tech, whatever, you know, they're all concerned that we've actually so mongrelized the genetics of our forest that we don't have the genetic base to grow the big cathedral trees that we used to see in those black and white photos of 1890. Are you with me? Yeah. And so the carbon economy for the first time allows us to return, not with fire, but with chippers and chainsaws and thoughtful management, to return to culling the diseased and the junk to drive our soil development program, and leaving the biggest, best trees, because you don't want to chip those, leaving the best trees, and suddenly we have been able on our farm to return to that pre-European genetic development economy of the pre-European forest. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay? And if that were spread throughout the state, we could eliminate all chemical fertilizer buying, and we would have millions and millions of dollars worth of business for little 5 and 6 group entrepreneurial stewards scavenging behind lumber companies and going into private woodlots and thinning them out and making room for the nice big walnuts and the oaks, you know, to grow, and turning our forest into the pre-European beauty cathedral forest of yesteryear. Okay, that's a lot of material. Questions? Yes, we do. We can't get there today. It's too far. But yes. So the pigs. So the pig, when they're done with this, and it takes us about 6 weeks to do this. Now all these pigs, hundreds of them, are out in pig pastures that are rejuvenating forests. Okay, widely spaced. Looks like a park. Okay, it's just beautiful. And the pigs disturb the ground enough to get the grass growing, and then the trees. So tomorrow's forest is growing with the pigs, so you have cash flow, you know, while you're growing tomorrow's forest. We also have acorn finishing glens, where we've just taken electric fence on a little nylon rope and zigzagged it from tree to tree out, you know, 5 acres. Let the pigs harvest the acorns. They eat the worms that affect the oak trees, and then we can go in, and help the pigs by taking some of the mountain laurel and the little, you know, the gum trees, the junk, the green maple, the junky stuff. Take those out and open up that canopy so that the big oak trees, the mighty oaks, can then spread and actually grow unweedy and unimpeded. Yeah, great question. Yes, ma'am.
This looks like a lot of hay to me. Do you use all of this on farm, and do you ever lose any from the bottom? You know, how do you get all the way down to the bottom?
Yeah, well, yeah, great question. Did everybody hear the questions? Looks like a lot of hay to me, right? Yeah. Okay. This is one of the logistic issues as a direct marketer. This will be something you probably haven't thought of. Because we direct market our beef, we're in sale barns, okay? Commodity beef, all right? Well, we could buy and sell based on feed. When we got grass, we buy cows, you know, whatever, stockers. And when we don't, that's like, you know, feeder calves, you know, weaned stock. And when we don't have grass, we sell them. You know, you just trade, and you just bring in animals to match your grass. You sell them when you don't. Okay, that's a very simple commodity-based system. All right, but here's the deal: we're not in that game. We've got T-bone steaks in the freezer, and as much as we would like to think that all of our customers would understand if we said, you know, we had this century drought this summer, and we just don't have beef for you, you have to wait until, you know, next year to come back. Even our most loyal customers will not understand, will go somewhere else, and not come back the next year. So we have to, see how we're in a belt and suspenders, redundancy, okay? we have to belt and suspender our program so that we can weather the worst weather condition you can imagine, because at the end of our pipeline is a customer buying a pound of ground beef. And she wants that ground beef, and yeah, she reads about the drought in the paper, she reads about the flood in the paper, she reads about these things, but at the end of the day, her kids want a hamburger and she's going to make it for them. That's the truth, okay? And I'm not saying this to belittle anybody, trust me, okay? It's just the realities of the way it is, right? So, although we average feeding hay only 40 days a year, the average farmer around here feeds for 120, and we have 4 times as many per acre as they do, we have to have a contingency plan for the worst situation you can imagine in order to satisfy Mrs. Customer on that end of the stick. So yes, it is, we typically like to have 2 to 3 years worth of hay on hand, okay? Because 3 years ago we had a drought, a terrible drought the year before, and then we had a long spring. Was it 3 or 4 years ago? It wasn't that long ago. We entered the spring with not a stick of hay on the farm. So it happened. Now, that's a once in 15 years. But once in 15 years, if you lose 2/3 of your customers, it's devastating. Okay? So this is part of the cost and the extra care in making sure that we have a continuous flow of product going into the retail space. Question, yes?
How many cows do you actually get in this barn area here?
Yeah, okay, so this, with all the awnings right here, and there's a great big one in the back, this is big enough for 180, and then we have another shed right up the front there. Some of you can see the roof through there. That's enough for about 120, and so we've got enough space for about 300 head here. Now we have about 1,000, so we don't do this with everybody.